everyone, welcome to Random Encounter 332 or 332. My name is John O'Logan, and this is my last week in New Glasgow. If you've been listening to the past two episodes, I have been in New Glasgow this entire trip. And I have some actual sad news to share with you if you enjoy ridiculous long-running jokes. Abercrombie Video is gone. It's gone full circle, actually. Yep. When I was very small, it used to be Abercrombie Variety Store. And then they got like a small wall of VHS and SNES games to rent, including the first place I ever rented Final Fantasy VII. And then they pivoted to a full video rental store called Abercrombie Video. They closed down Abercrombie Variety and became Abercrombie Video. And now they no longer rent videos, and they've renamed themselves Abercrombie Variety. So while I cannot fault their business sense for finally stopping running a video rental business like 15 years after video rental stopped being a viable business at all, I am saddened that one of the last bastions of physical media has been lost and now only sells pop, chips, and overpriced groceries.
Oh. The best job I ever had was working in a video rental store. So that makes me very sad.
That's really funny. Worst job I ever had was working in a video rental store. But mine was Blockbuster.
Yeah, I worked for like it was like it's called Movie Gallery, and they only had them like in like the boondocks of everywhere in America.
Oh man, working at a video store in like the 90s, 2000s, that was like a mom and pop operation would have been an awesome job.
Oh, it was great. It was great.
Yeah.
This was my college job. It was the best job I ever had.
Yeah. Blockbuster Video was not that.
I'm sure.
Anyway, so everyone out there, don't worry about it because we're going to keep the spirit of Abercrombie Video alive in its heyday of 1997 with a game that we'll be talking about today that was released in 1997. And to chat about it today, we have Bob.
Hi.
And Zach.
Hello.
So the game we're talking about today is Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles. Yes, we will be having a small discussion about how to pronounce Ivalice. Anyway, regardless, it was released originally in 1997 for the PlayStation. It was at the time a significant departure for the series, as before this it was, Final Fantasy 1 through 6, turn-based traditional RPG. And this shifted towards a complex grid-based strategy RPG. It has its roots, obviously, from various Final Fantasies, but primarily I would say Final Fantasy 3 and 5 for the job system. It also was kind of descended from the acclaimed SRPG Tactics Ogre, which also got a remaster, I think, last year that was pretty well received. And there are a lot of reasons why people remember Final Fantasy Tactics very fondly. One of the reasons being it was the first game to introduce the world of Ivalice, which is a extremely complex, politically charged setting that shows up in a variety of other Final Fantasy and spin-offs, Vagrant Story, Final Fantasy XII. And this game is sort of beloved. And it originally got a remake, I believe, on the PSP, and it was a pretty damn good remake, War of the Lions. Unfortunately, it also experienced some technical hurdles, like a lot of slowdown. Then that was ported over to iOS and Android. Those issues were smoothed out. That port included a lot of extra content, including some animated cutscenes and things like that. And yeah, they have decided to just say, we're going to remake it. And they did. And this is arguably the definitive version, except it doesn't include all of the content from the PSP version. So who knows if it is definitive or not. Anyway, it doesn't matter because regardless of how you are playing Final Fantasy Tactics, it is a pretty darn amazing experience. So for both you, Bob and Zach, I'm just going to start off right at the beginning. Bob, let's start with you. What is your personal history with Final Fantasy Tactics? Like, when did you first play it? And what were this is a long time ago, but do you remember what it was like playing it for the first time?
So my first encounter at a friend's house, he was in the middle of the Fort Zeaton battle, and I'd never seen anything like it before. I mean, I played strategy games on like the NES and all that. I played Ogre Battle, and to see a Final Fantasy game in a tactical fashion with the awesome isometric view and the cool characters and animations and all that, immediately fell in love. I'm like, I have to have this. So when I got a PlayStation 1 in 1998, I also got Final Fantasy Tactics. And I was instantly hooked. Everything about it, including how complex the story was. There was a certain amount of mystique And this is a deeper side discussion perhaps, but I love it when there's mystique and lack of clarity in games. It can give you a sense of discovery when you realize different details later on. So that's something that drew me in. But it was just, I've never played a game as complex as that in 1998, and it was just fun, and you felt a true sense of customization. Like you could really play any way you want and still be successful, which you don't always see even today.
Zach, what was your first exposure to the game?
I mean, I originally bought it because it had the name Final Fantasy on it.
Yeah, that was so part of me kind of wonders whether or not Final Fantasy Tactics was a Trojan horse.
No, I mean, for me, it absolutely was, because I was like, I'd come off of 7. I've been playing Final Fantasy since the first one. So like, there was no question, like, if it said Final Fantasy, I was going to ask for it for Christmas or whatever. You know, I was 12 when this game came out. But man, this game challenged me in ways that we will discuss. The first time I played it, I didn't understand how to add additional units. And so I had to do the first battle with just 2 characters. But like, as I kept going through it, and as I kept struggling with it, and as I kept having a hard time with it, like, it was like, what is this story? And like, what is it doing? And coming off of Final Fantasy VII, which at the time to me was like the peak of all storytelling. And I was like, this is like weird, and it's hard, and it's engaging, and it's dark, and it kind of threw me for a loop at the time. And that I played it like 12 times in the years since. And I still think it's the final story told in Final Fantasy. And it's one of the greatest games ever made. And my limited experience with this remaster is very positive. Maybe
the word you were looking for was adult. This game feels very adult in a way that a lot of other Final Fantasies don't. And Final Fantasy games are, they do have complex narratives. But there's something about this one specifically that feels like it is a grown-up story, if you ignore, of course, the original localization, which we'll get into in a few minutes. For me, my first exposure was in Game Players magazine, because I had a subscription to Game Players. It was my favorite thing my favorite day was when I would come home from school and there would be the magazine sitting in my mailbox. Wow, a different time. And I was obviously keeping very much in touch with Final Fantasy VII and those developments. And, there's another Final Fantasy game coming out. I remember seeing it. I remember renting it. I remember loving it. I've never beaten it. I've gotten fairly far in it, but I didn't own it. I only rented it. So I eventually just, like, giant strategy games are not the best option for rentals, unfortunately. But when you're a kid, sometimes you don't have any choice because you don't have any money. So yeah, one of the reasons I'm excited for this major re-release is because at some point I will be able to play through the whole thing beginning to end, and a very, very good quality version of it, as I understand it. So Bob, your review, it kind of opens up and it starts talking about, why this is your favorite game of all time, the number of playthroughs you've done of it, that sort of thing. But another thing you talk about is the new coat of paint on this game, and the tone of this game, and how it, I guess the tone of Final Fantasy Tactics is extremely unique, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons it's such a standout game even today.
It really does force the player to engage with a variety of different themes that, like we mentioned earlier, aren't really involved in other Final Fantasy games. Zach, what's your take on the game's tone? Like, it obviously has that, like, hopeful adventure Final Fantasy feel, but then there's also something very much darker and political underneath the surface.
I think the way you just described it really captures it, because I've played Tactics probably at least 10 times, and I went back and played Tactics Ogre, sort of the game that's probably its closest analog, about 5 years ago for retro, and I thought it was just okay. And it was because, like, it sort of it felt like more of an intellectual exercise in some ways. It was more like, I'm going to teach you this about war. Whereas Final Fantasy Tactics, it certainly is teaching us something about war, especially if you're younger, like I was when I first played it. But it also doesn't take itself too seriously at the same time. I think that the fact that it's Final Fantasy, it sort of forced Matsuno, the guy who sort of is the brainchild of these games, to not only tell a serious, thoughtful, engaging, and also, as he himself has said, like still important today narrative, but also to have like a little bit of fun with it at times. And so I think that it's deathly serious in a way that still matters, but it also like knows how to have fun with itself at the same time.
One of the things, as I mentioned in the preamble, I think one of the reasons for that, I guess, that tonal shift is the world that it's set in, Ivalice, which arguably is Final Fantasy's most developed world because it's been in a variety of games. I believe it was also featured in 14, right, Zach?
Sort of. Like it's sort of like kind of it's hard to cut all this. It's the same way that you're getting a story told about a world in Tactics, sort of. That kind of is the same thing that happens in 14. A lot of the same characters are referenced. It is definitely the story that is told in 14 is meant to hit harder for people who understand the world of Ivalice. That's probably the best way I can put it without spoiling it too much.
Yeah, we're not going to talk too much about it, but this is the game that introduced it. I'm just curious, both of you have played this game countless times. Have you played any of the other games that are set in this world?
Yeah, so I've played Vagrant Story, which I would say is very loosely connected to this world, but it's still got the same color choice. It's still got the same serious, macabre vibe. So I think it's a cousin, at least, in terms of its atmosphere. And I've played Final Fantasy XII and the GBA Final Fantasy Advance games, which are very different in terms of tone, but most
one of them starts with a snowball fight.
Right, exactly.
So fun though.
They're still phenomenal games, yes.
Yeah.
And I even enjoyed like the childlike story in those. But yeah, the Ivalice universe is a universe. Just give me more, please. I'm hoping this game really takes off, at least to the point where Square-Enix wants to make more in this universe, because of all video games, this is my favorite place to be.
And I would imagine that one of the reasons of that is the tactical combat system, which obviously the grid-based combat system has been used many years before this in Tactics Ogre, for example, or before like Shining Force, obviously Fire Emblem. For you, though, what makes this implementation of it different than those other games?
I think a lot of it has to do with the game balance and the customization and the expert use of height. Every battlefield, and I talk about this in the review a bit, it feels like you've got a real sense of place, like it looks like a natural battlefield, but it also seems meticulously crafted to be a strong strategic area to deploy units and figure out how you're going to solve the puzzle of reaching that guy up there and using your movement points correctly. Like there's so much nuance to the strategy, but you don't need to be running all these calculations in your head at the same time. It almost happens without you even thinking. It's very intuitive. And I honestly don't know how they establish that, like between the balance and the open customization. It still feels difficult, but very open-ended at the same time. And from a design perspective, I don't even know how you do that. Like, and they caught lightning in a bottle in 1997, and we've got strategy RPGs today that cannot achieve the same thing. It is bizarre to me.
To be fair, the amount of lightning that was going on at Squaresoft in the late 90s was insane.
Yes.
There was much lightning. It's surprised that anyone survived being electrocuted. Zach, with that in mind, as Bob mentioned, there is a lot of, I guess, having the high ground matters in this game.
It sure does. Yeah.
I was curious, in terms of you, obviously no spoilers. There's going to be some spoilers in this, but nothing like big. I guess this is a gameplay spoiler. Do you have any like specifically favorite map that comes to mind?
You know, like some of the early maps are the ones that really strike me because I feel like this game is hardest at the beginning before you get either you grind out jobs or you actually you just like you find the job balance that matters. So like right now, like because I'm playing on tacticial difficulty, which is like the higher difficulty in this version, I'm stuck in the city of Dorder. And there's this archer who's sitting up top and it just keeps like pegging me from like up top. And maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. There's this archer that sits up top and it keeps hitting me from up top. And I just keep like sort of thinking about like, how can I adjust my jobs to get up to that? And it's always like, I think it's a lot of those early maps. Dorter, I think, is one of the best examples where it's balanced in the way I think Bob said it really well. Like it's balanced in a way that feels like there is a solution that I can figure out without going crazy, but also it works really well. Like there are some maps in like the end of chapter 3. Those of you who know tactics know this, that I think occasionally lose some of that balance, but I think that like cities in general in tactics end up being really interesting maps.
Yep. No, I agree with all that. And I've played almost entirely on tactician difficulty. There were 2 battles. I notched it down just because I had to make sure I got the review out for the embargo. And Dorter was one of those 2. And I think that's because Dorter is like, okay, it's serious time now. You figured out how to play. You did the small battles earlier in the game. Okay, put on your big boy pants because we're playing serious now. And on tactician difficulty, it wasn't the archers that bothered me. It was the mages because they
fire off spells so fast.
Well, it's like a one-shot kill.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Well, it's not just the maps. It's also another reason why the game is so much fun is because of the job system. Because it's not the first time a job system has been seen in an SRPG, but it literally took the job system, which I think is brilliant, from 3 and 5, and put it on top of basically every single unit in the game. So this is a pretty basic question. Anyone who plays the game knows it, but can you explain how like a character can acquire and then develop different job classes?
Sure. So there's experience points, which if you've played an RPG, you know what that is. You get 100 experience points, you level up. Yay, you get stronger. And then you got job points. And you accumulate enough job points, whatever class you're using, like if it's Squire, one of the beginning classes, or Chemist, the other beginning class. Eventually, when you get enough levels, you unlock a new job. And then it kind of spiders out from there in like almost skill tree fashion, where you can use different combinations of levels for several different jobs to get a very complex late game class.
Out of curiosity, again, this is reductive, and I know that it's a very big game. What would you say is your favorite class?
Oh my God. How do you even pick? It's Monk.
Ninja.
I feel like
Monk
Ninja is the obvious pick just because of the pure aggression from dual blades, and it's so fast, speed and damage. What else do you need? But Monk is just the multifaceted hero. I mean, they can revive, they can heal, they can do ranged attacks, they can beat the crap out of you up close. Like it does everything. And if you're short on cash, they don't use a lot of equipment because they use the fist.
Yeah. There's a fight that involves a gate, and those of you who played the game know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly
and
what you're talking about.
The very first time I played this game, the only way, because I was 12, I couldn't strategize or come up with these crazy builds. The only way I was able to get past that fight was by speccing Ramza into Ninja, which involves some grinding, honestly. And because of that Ninja will always be my favorite class, but also Ninja, as Bob said, is an extremely powerful class. But the reality is that, like, if you're playing at a very high level in tactics, like, it's the dual wielding thing that it gives other classes that really matters about Ninja. But I don't know, man. Like, even when I get into the end game, I always have like one sort of NPC character, even when some characters are wiping the floor with the map. Like, I'm like, I still want a ninja in my party. I just love a ninja.
Well, that actually nicely transitions into the next question about the job system, which, as I said, it's inspired by Final Fantasy V. And one of the beautiful pieces of Final Fantasy V is once you master a job, you don't even need to master the job. You learn skills, and then you can equip those skills when you have other jobs. So you can create hybrid classes. And that system is also here. And because of that, it allows you to create some very unique builds for pretty much everyone in your army if you want to spend all of the time doing that. Bob, so how does that system work in practice, I guess?
So you got your main class, which is what your character looks like. Let's say ninja. And then you have a sub job class, which if you've leveled up a different class, you can give them basically all of the active abilities of that class. So if it's archer, you've got your charge abilities. If it's mage, you can just start throwing spells at enemies. And then it's got a reaction ability. And a reaction ability is some of the time when you get hit, something else happens. And then you got like a passive support ability like dual wielding. So if you're not a ninja, you can learn the dual wielding ability. So when you become a monk, you can hit with 2 fists instead of 1. And then you have a movement ability, which is going to help you jump. It's going to help you move farther, walk better on different terrain, things like that.
Yeah, so it very much affects how you handle each map, basically.
Yeah, no, and it's really cool because every map's different. They've got different elevations, different walls in place, different enemy jobs in the way. So if you've got a lot of different tools at your disposal, you can change your characters almost completely with different abilities and reaction abilities and all that stuff to fit that unique situation, which is so gratifying because you feel smart for figuring out how to get around the obstacles using a different build.
Well, figuring out how to use a build at all can also be relatively challenging because if I recall correctly, back on the PSX version, it was the menu systems were dense, shall we say, and they were not well explained. Like, especially if you were like me and a kid and you rented it from Blockbuster and it did not come with a manual. I would imagine that maybe some of that is a little more streamlined this time around, or is it the same kind of interface as before?
It's a very similar interface, at least in terms of the menus. There are quality of life features like you can fast forward things. It's also a lot easier to visualize how different job classes feed into others. And going through the Chronicle, which is basically the lore of the universe. So you can look at characters, events, all that stuff. There's a lot of visuals and maps and whatnot that help you understand what's going on in the story. But in terms of pure gameplay, it's very much the same color palette and the same series of menus.
Yeah, that Chronicle is extremely useful, I would imagine, because this is a very complex game and characters come and go, and there are a lot of players that you need to keep track of.
Yeah, and it's handy because, like, let's say Ramza, for example, the lead character, there's going to be a lot of change in this character over time. So by just pressing R1 or L1, you can fast forward during the different chapters of his life, and it will update as you go, and it will flag every time there's an update. So if you really don't want to miss any content, you want to keep up to date, what are they saying about Ramza, or maybe you put the game down for a while, you want to go back to it. It is so well written and so well designed that it's easy to understand the story if you want to put in the time. It is still a complex story, but originally it was very hard to make sense of it. They've got a map that shows you basically every major battle in the game with arrows and different character portraits across the map of Ivalice, what's happening, who's fighting who's going where. And I would have loved something like that in 1997. Yeah, now that I know the story already, I mean, I've been playing this game so much, I know the story backwards and forwards, but to have that back then would have been a lifesaver.
Another lifesaver for a lot of people are going to be some of the difficulty options that are offered because, you know, the Final Fantasy Tactics is, especially in some of the later battles, is not really I wouldn't say it's a difficult game, but there are some battles later in it that are pretty darn challenging. So this new version actually has different modes. Zach, you mentioned that you're playing Tactician. Why are you playing? I'm assuming that's because you played the game multiple times.
I like the Tactician difficulty because, like, the first time I played this game, like, especially over the first chapter, like, I just got bodied. I just got destroyed over and over again. And I have never, in all my playthroughs, gotten into, like, crazy stuff with arithmeticians or, like, any, like, calculators, whatever they're called. I've never really gotten into the craziness, but, like, I know where the pain points are. And so I've always sort of, like, known how to prepare for them. Whereas this time, like, I know the story and there's all this other stuff, like, kind of around it that I like, but I want something that's going to kind of push me to figure out some of those more challenging or more broken builds. And, you know, I'm still in the early game, and I'm guessing it's probably the hardest it's ever going to be, because I don't have the the tools to break the game yet. But it's just like another way of engaging with the game, whereas, you know, I've engaged with it other ways so many times.
Difficulty modes are Squire, Knight, and Tactician. I believe that Knight is the original difficulty, or at least close to the original difficulty with some balance changes. And Tactician obviously offers a much greater challenge. And Squire obviously basically allows people to play the game and really focus in on the story. And honestly, I can't see anything wrong with, if you want to focus on the story in this game, great choice, because it's a very, very good story. But if you also want to dig deep into the, tactics of it, that's there too. Bob, I think you mentioned this in the review, but I'm just going to ask you here, what did you play it on?
I played almost completely on Tactician. So there were 2 battles. I notched it down to Knight just so I could make sure I got the review out. One was Daughter, and then the other one was That Battle with That Fellow, where you're locked in, and it's Ramza versus this guy. And yeah, and I think anyone who's played the game knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that was so obscenely difficult, and I was even a higher level than him.
Even with like Tailwind and all the other stuff, like the monk abilities, it still was 2.
It's
Sorry,
a numbers game.
I'm getting into the weeds here, but like...
No, I'm happy to talk about this in depth. It really was a numbers game because, and this is one of those difficulty spikes in the game where like everything's fine and it feels good. Like Tactician, if you played the game before, just feels so good. It's a nice, tight experience. Like you earn every win. It's very gratifying. You feel like you really have to understand the game to be successful, and it's rewarding and everything. And then you get to That Battle, and it's just pure numbers, and it's like a gimmick fight. And I almost feel like they did this on purpose, just like as a wink and a nod. The nice thing is you can always just back out of those extended battles where it's just battle after battle. In the original game, if you could actually soft lock yourself if you saved.
I may have done that the first time I played.
Right.
Yeah.
So I actually notched down the difficulty on that one. Just it felt like BS. And even after notching down the difficulty, I was like, oh yeah, I remember why this battle's hard.
It's interesting that there are some things in this game that are rebalanced. You mentioned the review, charge time for spells, some abilities were rebalanced. It seems interesting to me that they did not rebalance arguably the most notorious and in some, I would say, unfun, not fun section of the game. Like, it's memorable. It's certainly a memorable experience because like that's one of the things the game is known for, but it's not because it's a fun time.
Yeah, it's by definition notorious. I mean, I think if you talk to a lot of people who've been playing RPGs for decades, they all know that battle. And it's like, oh yeah, BS levels of that battle. It's like a flag in the sand. It's like, oh, is it that bad? Yes, it's that bad. But I think they made it harder on purpose. That's the only thing I can think of, because every other part of the game, like that one character you get later in the game who breaks the game in half, you're like, oh, every battle's trivial now. Not the case. That he's still definitely a power spike. You're happy to have him, but you still got to earn those victories at the point, which I was so happy they did.
Alongside rebalancing some of the combat, there are lots of other quality of life features. For example, there's a fast forward feature, which I imagine speeds up the game quite a bit in terms of, I mean, tactics games are a bit slow by their very nature. So the fast forward feature probably makes it a little more accessible to folks who are playing it today. The thing that really caught my attention as a great quality of life feature is a clear turn order display. Zach, when you're still in the early game, but obviously you would have come into these 2 things. How did they impact you? Do you say, oh, these are great? Or were you like, I don't need these, I just want to play a classic?
No, I mean, they helped me a lot because especially with in the early game in particular, where you're fighting a lot of archers and black mages, which in the original versions of Tactics were maybe not very useful classes or jobs. Like, now that I know that like the archer is going to fire off his aim 2 turns after he charges it, like, oh, now I know I'm going to die real fast. And so it's helpful on that front. Like even as a person who's experienced with these games, I think it's actually in some ways even more helpful to me because like I know what the normal rhythm of these moves are. And now it's giving me the opportunity to see like, oh, this is what the new rhythm is. And it's teaching me even how to use my own skills that I maybe wouldn't have used before. But, you know, it's sort of like the du jour thing that a lot of games do now after Octopath. And I think it's a great feature.
Jerry, are there any other quality of life features that you think are, I mean, there are some, but anything that you think should specifically be mentioned?
So in terms of quality of life, I mean, we kind of touched on them all. I think what a lot of people are going to like is fast forward because it makes grinding, if that's what you're doing, a lot easier. Then there's the job class skill tree. And something I talked about in my review, and I'm probably definitely in the minority on this, is like, I almost don't like how easy it is to understand the paths. I liked it originally trying to like stumble my way through, okay, how do I unlock this class? What do I got to do? And you can do it. There were ways to do it in the original game, but it's so mindlessly simple in Ivalice Chronicles that I don't know. I feel like it takes some of the discovery out of the game. But in terms of quality of life, I mean, the Chronicle is huge from a story perspective, the fast forwarding, and of course the turn order.
Another one that I think it will greatly affect how the game is played and the enjoyment of it for a lot of people is going to be the flee command for essentially random battles.
Yeah, no, I should have touched on that. There's just so much to think about with this game. But yeah, so most people don't like random battles. And one of the nice things about remasters or remakes is you don't have to do random battles. And if you're just trying to do the different jobs that the bars let you do, the rumors, and you just want to spend some days walking back and forth, the flee command makes it so easy. Or if there's some map you just don't want to fight at again, you just flee past it and then just accept a random battle later. Conversely, you can click on a point on the map and have a battle there. So if like you're farming a rare battle at Barry's Hill, for example, you just click on Barry's Hill and you'll get that battle instantly.
I think that's a tremendous quality of life feature that just will make things much simpler to essentially, like you said, grind and to search for items. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. Well, something that is not new, but might seem new if you've only ever played the PlayStation version is the script. So like I mentioned in the preamble there, this is reusing the script from the PSP re-release, which is a revision of the original PlayStation translation, because the original PlayStation translation was infamously bad. It is I think it was a point of pride for Squaresoft, because that's what they were back then, that the story was so strong that despite the quality of the localization, the quality of the story still shined through. But now it doesn't need to. Now you just have this amazing script. I'm curious if either of you have some nostalgia for the original localization, or if you're just like, nope, that's jettison that out the window. We're going with ye old English, and it's awesome.
Yeah. The War of the Lions localization is a masterclass in localization. It's one of the most important ones, I think, ever. I don't have any love or nostalgia or care for the original. War of the Lions one is excellent, and I think that the very minor adjustments that I've noticed in this one are very true to that. And I think it's great.
Yeah, there's no spoony bard lines in the original. Like, there's no like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They said the line. There's nothing like
the
that.
Original. I would say that some of the lines in like some of the Final Fantasy localizations are quite camp, frankly, like Spoony Bard, for example. But like that's just not in this. It was just a bad translation. That's all.
I hate dishing on it because I know folks worked hard at it, and back then it was probably very difficult to bring a tremendous script like this across languages and cultures and all that. So I'm still appreciative because, like you said, the story still shine through. So they still did an adequate job because I fell in love with the story in 1998. So good enough, I suppose.
I feel like the localizers back then, and again, no shade thrown to them because it was still a brand new industry. A lot of them weren't storytellers. A lot of them weren't writers. So the localizations were not, they just weren't well written, frankly. But now that's a completely different story. And certainly with this game, it's a completely different story. This is a gorgeous localization. And not just because, it makes sense and it presents the story in a very real way. In places, it's poetry. It uses an, I guess, old-timey talking style, but in a way that I don't think is confusing really most of the time. It's very easily understood.
So yeah, and I touched on this in my review a bit. There were definitely parts of the script where I'm like, wait, what did they just say? And it's so rich with diversity of vocabulary, sophisticated vocabulary. And again, the grammatical structure is not what we're accustomed to. And when you've got all those factors at play at once, and you're in a high charged situation where characters are speaking from the heart and everything, you want so much to understand what they're saying. You just read it. I'm like squinting. I'm like staring at the screen. I'm like, I have no idea what they're saying. I really wish I understood what they're saying. But even with that, the voice acting, oh my God, we could spend an hour just talking about the voice acting. That alone is a reason to buy this game. I am absolutely in love with the actors who delivered a phenomenal performance, who really enhanced the story. I mean, the writing, without a good script, you got nothing. But even if you don't understand everything saying, in very few of the lines, the emotions conveyed are heartrending. There were times, just because of the voice acting, I was welling up. I was like, this is so emotionally powerful. And the actors are treating it with the utmost respect. And I am so grateful and appreciative of the casting, of the talent that went into this game. And I really hope people appreciate it as much as I did.
I think that what you're saying, Bob, in terms of the voice acting, like I think that, first of all, what's interesting is like they have like all these like major voice actors nowadays, like Ben Starr, for example, in these relatively minor roles. And the thing that had like Dice Darg is, you know, obviously a very important character, but he's not like, you know, on screen a lot. Whereas I think that like some of the newer voice actors, like the dude who's doing Ramza is excellent. The guy who's doing Delita, and you know that whoever does Delita needs to absolutely knock it out of the park. And he does. Like it's like the mouths that are moving, and I think you talked about this in your review, Bob, like is a little distracting. It's weird, but like I do think that like the rhythm of the language, which, you know, it's poetry, right? Like it's always been poetry. That's sort of the original storytelling of, you know, humans. It really adds a lot to the rhythm of what's happening. I've never, at any point as I'm playing so far, been like confused by what they're saying, because as you guys have pointed out, they are like, because they're delivering it vocally, like the rhythm of what they're saying is coming through. And I think it's very strong.
You're right, Zach. This is not like Old English. It's inspired by it. But the story of Tactics, I believe, is partially inspired by War of the Roses. Which is an actual period of English history. However, it is also Shakespeare focused very heavily on these for many of his histories. So I like the fact that this game is very Shakespearean, and it might be one of the most Shakespearean Final Fantasy games ever made, just in terms of the stakes and the human stakes of it all.
Yeah, so I think thinking of this in terms of a theater performance is exactly right. I remember way back, it was either in the late 90s or early 2000s. I'm like, if there's any video game that needs to be put on a stage, it is Final Fantasy Tactics. I think there would be no better fit. And the script makes the case for that.
I'm a little surprised that Japan hasn't actually done that, because they love putting video games on stage. If there is an Ace Attorney stage adaptation, actually a few of them, there's no reason not to have a stage adaptation of this.
Yeah, I hope it gains popularity as a result of this remaster, because stuff like that could happen and should happen.
I would say this is fairly obvious, but I kind of want to touch on it just because when you think remaster, this is the thing that immediately comes to mind, which is the graphic presentation. Bob, you mentioned in your review that the presentation of the game has largely gone untouched. Original sprites have been preserved. And you actually, in the game, have a choice between playing the new remastered graphics or the original. Although, weirdly, you can't switch between the two as you go, I understand. So I'm just curious, in your opinion, about the visuals. How have they been made crisper, and how did they maintain the overall aesthetic of the game?
So my understanding, I've not played the original. You're right. You do have two options: play the enhanced or play the original. I think the original is not just graphics. I think it doesn't have any of the modern furnishings. I could be completely wrong about that, but that was the impression I had.
It has the War of the Lions localization, right, but otherwise it is the PS1 version. That is correct.
Yeah, because I think Square would prefer to the original localization never happened. We don't talk about that. Right.
So I'm kind of a negative Nancy about this with the visuals. I wasn't a fan of the Pixel Remaster visuals, at least in terms of the sprites. I thought they were washed out and a little too pastel. I like the original colors for Final Fantasy VI, for example. And I kind of felt the same way here. I heard about the remaster and I was amped. And then I saw what they looked like, and they were kind of, I don't know, I felt like it was a little blurry. I didn't exactly like the way the colors flowed on the map or within the characters. But, I wasn't going to let that ruin my day. So I am like, I accept it for what it is. But after a while, even me going into it not crazy about the visuals, you kind of just stop caring or even noticing because everything else is so good. Not that the game looks bad, it's just not how I would have liked it to look. At the same time, like you also said, I don't think you could really do the visuals any differently without completely changing the way it looks, because part of the charm is the artistic style, the no noses on the portraits, and then the pacing back and forth in place in battle, and all the charm that comes with that. So the upgrade, I guess, to the colors in the game might be to some a selling point. To me, it was actually a deterrent. But the rest of the package, like I said, is so good, I'm willing to look past it, and it's not worth overlooking the game because of some quibble about the visuals.
How about you, Zach? What do you think of it?
I am the sort of person who doesn't. I mean, with a game like this, like the character portraits are what I really care about. Like what it looks like on the screen. To me, especially with the tactical RPG, like I'm mostly concerned about like, can I figure out what square is where? And it's a little bit easier in this game because of the ability to use your right stick to kind of adjust things. So besides like the mouths moving while people are talking, which I think is a little odd looking sometimes, I am not in any way bothered by it, but I am less bothered by these things than Bob is. So like it's like I like the sort of like brighter visual palette with some of these things like Lunar or in this case Tactics that we get. So it's not a deterrent to me, and I just actually don't really care that much one or the other, to be honest.
I was a little surprised. You mentioned this in the review, Bob, but I was a little bit surprised that they didn't do a reorchestration of the score in this. It just seemed like a no-brainer because they did it with the remaster, with the Pixel remasters, but they didn't do it here. That's a weird omission.
Well, and I can only speculate why that is. I think this being originally on the PlayStation, the music is still of a very good quality. To me, it's one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. I mean, battle music, they're all bangers. Ovelia's theme is one of my all-time favorite themes of all time. With the Pixel remasters, you got NES and SNES sounds and music. So that one, you're definitely going to feel an orchestrated version more than you would in this game. Would I have liked a full orchestrated version of the soundtrack? Yes, please. I would pay a lot of money for that. At the same time, I mean, the music's still fantastic. And going back to the story and the theatrics of this and the emotions that are conveyed, I think music in video games is underrated. We all like certain tracks and soundtracks, but a lot of times stories are contingent on a good track that pairs with what characters are going through or saying, and that is phenomenally done here.
Incidentally, as someone who's looking for people who appreciate a good video game soundtrack, we have a podcast for you. It is called Rhythm Encounter. It's every other week. Give it a listen. There's a lot of Final Fantasy inspired here. Obviously, it's a Final Fantasy game, but I think one of the things that really does make Tactics different from the mainline Final Fantasy games, not aside from like the combat style, is the music. It is a very different style. It's much more classical sounding than the other Final Fantasy games. And I think that does very much contribute to its tone of the political and militaristic nature of this game, as opposed to a lot of the other Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, so the instrumentation is definitely unique, and you hear the Ivalice universe. Again, it's not just visuals, it's not just story, it's not just setting. Final Fantasy 12. You could hear a Final Fantasy 12 track and be like, is that from Tactics? Like, no, but it's the same style. They definitely achieved that. I mean, it being one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard is in part because of its instrumentation. It's so unique. You hear it in Final Fantasy 12. If you listen to a track from Final Fantasy 12, you might be confused to say, like, is that a Tactics track? Because they're so stylistically similar being set in the Ivalice universe, which is so smart from whoever composed the music across the different games. I like the comment you made about militaristic because it's got these long, somber, drawn-out notes, these bells. I think it's got fantastic use of bells in combat to make it have this oomph, this power that you might hear from a battle. Subtle touches like that can make every battle feel different, but also very nuanced.
Sakimoto actually did both Tactics and 12, so it does. It's very much a continuation Wow, my God, I am not as sharp on composers as some of the folks on Rhythm, but I'm looking at this like he was the composer of Ogre Battle, Tactics Ogre, Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics, obviously, Dragon Quarter. Wow, this is a hell of a resume. Anyway, all right. Well, I wanted to just mention one quick thing here, which is I alluded to it earlier. The extra content from the PSP release is just not here, aside from the localization. Either of you, do you feel like the lack of that content makes the game feel incomplete in any way, or does it matter? And this is going to be the definitive version moving forward.
I don't know if it's going to be the definitive version moving forward. I think folks who like extra content, like the GBA games for like Final Fantasy VI, there's bonus dungeons that aren't in the Pixel remasters. It's unfortunate, I guess, because more content's good. It's Final Fantasy Tactics. Is it ruining the game? No. Is it still worth $50? Definitely yes. I'm not gonna again let it ruin my day.
Yeah, I mean, like with the additional voice acting, I think alone is enough to recommend the new version, and the PSP content is fun and it's good, and but a lot of it's really to get the Dark Knight job, you have to do some wild stuff that is totally not necessary to beat the game, and it doesn't matter. And so do I miss Balthier, for example, or will I miss Balthier? Sure, but he's just a slightly better Mustadio. It's not. It doesn't really matter. I guess I played the PS1 version a lot more than the PSP version, so I don't have a lot of nostalgia for it. So I honestly don't really care that much. The thing that mattered about the War of the Lions version was the War of the Lions localization, and sort of that heart is maintained here, and the extra content, which just felt like a bonus that was sort of fun, but whatever, isn't here, and I don't really care.
Okay. Well, I really would like to thank both of you for coming on and talking about Tactics with me. This is really obviously a landmark game for a variety of reasons, and that's going to transition into our very short sort of discussion question, which is, it was a landmark title. It really, really was. There were strategy games before Tactics and strategy games after Tactics. Even though, as I mentioned, grid-based strategy games existed well before Tactics. And I think that it unlocked a lot of love for the series, which you can see continuing today with Fire Emblem and others. Just curious, what do you think its legacy and impact on the strategy RPG was, and just on just RPGs in general?
So I think that there's sort of two separate answers, because I think that it obviously has a huge impact on strategy RPGs. Strategy RPGs were they sort of existed in the US before Tactics, but not really. I know that Fire Emblem doesn't come here until after Melee, but I don't think that it gets a foothold ever in the RPG community if it's not for Tactics. So I think it's just it's important for just literally making the strategy RPG thing work. But I think that the more important thing from an RPG perspective is that it told us that mature storytelling can exist, can matter, can be important, can be something that people latch onto. And I think that, I while I recognize that other games were doing mature storytelling in these other sort of unique ways, this is a deep and rich and complicated story that deals with important themes, and it told us you can do that. And the only caveat I'll give to that is that I actually don't think a lot of people are doing that thing. And they're still sort of treating us like we can't read. And so I think that I want to think that it has given us this leeway to think how important these things are. But I also think that a lot of games don't trust their audience the way that this game does. And it wouldn't have existed if Final Fantasy wasn't attached to it, the name, and it wouldn't be as important. And so, yeah, it taught us something that we're still learning in terms of stories, I think.
How about you, Bob? What do you think the lasting legacy of this game is?
So I think Zach eloquently said exactly what needed to be said. The other thing I would just emphasize is the unique tone because it is somewhere between a Japanese style RPG and a Western style RPG. It's got the grit and the tension and the seriousness that and the gravity that comes with a lot of Western style RPGs, but it's still got that sense of drama and high emotion that you feel in a lot of Japanese style games. So like, I love both kinds of games, but this is like two great tastes that just go so well together because there's almost no romance here. There's almost no joking here. It's just serious the whole way through, but it's also got, you know, the soundtrack and the script that makes it so high emotion. And you don't always get that from like your Pillars of Eternity, your Divinity Original Sin, your Planescape Torment. Like those are great in their own storytelling fashions, but there's something about tactics that no other game has been able to achieve, imitated frequently, but never achieved. And I think a lot of it has to do with Zach. What he just said is, you know, trust your audience, allow the audience to pull something out of the story without spoon feeding everything and making it dumbed down a bit.
I think that all of that is completely true. And I mean, you don't need to look very far for the legacy of this game being, I guess, other grid-based things, more recent ones like Triangle Strategy, for example, or the most one-to-one comparison in terms of the tone and maybe the thing would be Unicorn Overlord, because Unicorn Overlord, of course, is a modern take on the ogre game, or the tactics ogre games, and I think that the legacy of this game obviously will continue. And hopefully, Bob, something you mentioned earlier, I mean, it'd be really cool to get Final Fantasy Tactics 2 at some point.
Or Zero. Give me that prequel. Yes. I want a prequel, 50 years more. Let's go.
Well, Square-Enix really does like putting zeros after their titles, so we might just see some good sales there. And Square-Enix aren't the only ones who are looking for good sales. We're looking for some good sales at our shop at www.rpgfan.com/shop. In it, you can find all kinds of things, mugs, you can find, we always talk about the baby onesies, and you can find shorts, which is just amazing. We now have RPG Fan shorts just in time for the winter. So you can pick those up, and you can also pick up our collaboration with Hyperplay RPG, the RPG Fan Review Card Collection, which is a showcase of nearly 300 of our review cards, as you can see on Instagram. And all three of us, Bob, Zach, and myself, are all in that book in a variety of reviews. So check that out. Little programming note, I don't know if you've noticed this, but occasionally I've referred to Bob as Jerry, and Jerry is Bob in this episode. Jerry and Bob are identical twins who have the exact same voice, so it's very easy to get confused. Just roll with it. If you know, you know.
He's sitting right next to me, stepping on the Ethernet cord. That's why I keep disconnecting.
That must explain it. Yes, Jerry and Bob. They were separated at birth, and they are constantly on the lookout for each other. Anyway. Another way to support us here at RPG Fan is you can check out our past episodes. For example, you can check out the last episode of Random Encounter. It was last week. We focused entirely on Hades 2. It's been a packed month, to put it mildly, both in terms of game releases and in terms of podcasts. But we're getting back to our regular schedule next week. So next week's going to be Rhythm, and then the week after that will be Random again. And we're just going to keep going from there. But also, not just Random, we also have Retro Encounter. Zach, what have you guys been talking about lately on Retro?
So the most recent episode that we had was our Yoko Taro sort of, we called it Auteur Encounter, where we looked at like all the things that he's either been the director on or the creative director on, and just looked at sort of the themes that he carries through his games and just sort of the wacky world of Yoko Taro. It was a good time. It was probably too long, but you know, if you want to listen to 2.5 hours of people gabbing about Yoko Taro, that's what it is. And coming up soon, we have an episode on Star Ocean 2.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. Also, the wacky world of Yoko Taro, that would be I would love if that was like the next land they build at Universal Studios. That would be amazing.
You know, I think you might die if you went, so I'm not sure about that.
They have the mascot right there. Can you imagine just seeing
Emil walking around? Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
We also have Rhythm Encounter, and because we did 2 episodes in a row, Rhythm also had 2 episodes in a row. So they also focused on some of the new music in Final Fantasy XIV, and the other was a creator-focused episode on Naoshi Mizuta. And yeah, check that out as well. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can fire us off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. If you have any ideas for discussion questions or any ideas for future episode themes, any games you'd like us to cover, please fire it off this way. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so to jlogan@rpgfan.com. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at johnologan.bluesky.social. I'm not the only person on here with a social media presence. Bob, where can we find you?
Bob@rpgfan.com. Don't overthink it.
Awesome. And Zach?
The best way is ZachW@rpgfan.com. I'm also on our Discord as ZachW.
Awesome. If everyone out there enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends to help us get the word out there. You can rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Bob, Zach, thank you very, very much for joining me today and talking about this game. I know this is respectively one of your favorite games, both of you, and it shone through in this episode. I'm really, really glad that this remaster is as good as it is. And hopefully a lot of new people are also going to be able to experience this this landmark game.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And to everyone out there, just a reminder, Rhythm Encounter's back next week, and we'll be back 2 weeks after that. So thank you very much for joining us, and whatever you are playing, have fun.